Jordan.
Attention guests in the luggage claim area, welcome to the Jordania Volcano Hotel. A couple of quick reminders before you approach the elevator towards the lobby. Jordan's Soapbox is a show broadcasted on-site and supported via Patreon. If you would like to support what I do and not cause the country of Jordania economic ruin, consider supporting it for behind-the-scenes access and other rewards. It's recommended frequent visitors subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for updates whenever new videos are made. Do you want to hang out with your fellow guests? Consider jacking into the Cyberpunk Jordan Discord, where you can hang out with me and talk about Sonic and Sega stuff, among other things. And now, our elevator shaft will be departing for the lobby area. Thank you for your attention and enjoy your stay.
Hello, my gummy bears. My name is Jordan, also known as CJ, and welcome back to Jordan's Soapbox, the show that talks about anything that I want to talk about. I have to kind of admit something with this show. I have a tendency to say, I'm not going to cover this, or I'm going to cover this next time on Jordan's Soapbox. And when I eventually change my mind, it's downright embarrassing. One example is Mobius 25 years later. I mentioned in my Mobius 30 years later review that I had no intention of covering this. It wasn't because of its quality, although that certainly is a reason, but because of what it is. Secondary stories. They haven't been talked about much on Jordan's Soapbox as we focused on main stories of issues, but secondary stories are equally important to Archie Sonic. They would often serve as a side dish, if you will, to the main story. And it could vary just as much in terms of focus and quality. And they've been around since the comics started. However, it's incredibly difficult to cover things like Mobius 25 years later, as it served as a side story for several issues of Archie Sonic. But I also recognize this series of stories is important to the larger history of Archie Sonic, to the point where we're still seeing the effects of it to this day, for better or worse. So we'll be sticking with the debut story in Sonic the Hedgehog 131, but before we talk about Mobius 25 years later, I think it's important to have some context. Ken Penders, as we've often talked about on this show, was a frequent writer for Archie Sonic, having contributed both to the main book and the spin-off Knuckles the Echidna that would last until 2000. The latter is important, as a storyline meant to be included in Knuckles the Echidna was Knuckles 20 years later, which would have focused on Lara Sue, daughter of Knuckles and Julie Sue, and other aspects that are mostly absent in Mobius 25 years later. This storyline was never used for one reason or another. To me, it's most likely because of the cancellation of Knuckles the Echidna, but some of its ideas would be reused for Mobius 25 years later. Even in its new form, Mobius 25 years later was treated as a big deal. So much so that unlike any other side story in Archie Sonic, it was on the darn cover of this issue. It was important to Penders as well. He cited in the letters as a story being very near and dear to his heart. And considering the following events, I believe it. So what's all the excitement about? Well, let's find out with Mobius 25 years later. Prelude. Should probably specify that. We start our story with an introduction from Merlin Prower, a relative of Tails, explaining there are a ton of folks who want to know the future, and he knows said future of those around him because he's a flippin' wizard or something. You know, I would think that he might want to use that information to save a lot of heartbreak, misery, death, among other things. No? Okay. Anyway, while he's introducing us to our tale, we have this little blue portal thing with a conversation between Sonic and Sally. Sonic is seen rejecting the idea of royalty and all that. I mean, noted, this is Sonic we're talking about, but why was this necessary though? It's sort of standalone and doesn't relate to anything that Merlin Prower is saying. Also, while this splash page is honestly really well done, what the heck is wrong with Lara Sue over here? Seriously, Lara Sue, do you need medical attention? Jordania medical staff is on standby. Moving into our story proper, we're introduced to an echidna named Mr. Periwinkle. What kind of name is that? Who is teaching a class of echidnas the history of Angel Island in this timeline. It serves as a convenient way to let the reader know that things are a little bit different around here. Most notably that Angel Island has developed its own self-contained biosphere. This somehow led to the gateway city of Portal being developed. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, there's literally a number of other explanations you could have thrown in, such as, oh, it caused increased trade or some natural resource. But it stays like this and doesn't really follow a logical train of sense. Regardless, he continues on with his lesson, discussing the governing structure of Angel Island as a democratic state. One of his students, Riki Lee, that is their name, you can laugh now, asks why they are called a republic. Another student answers it's because echidnas didn't believe in backwards things like the rest of Mobius, like monarchy. I don't know whether that's racist, xenophobic, or both. Both? Probably both. Lara Sue has the correct answer, but the topic of the Guardian of Angel Island comes up, which seems to be an oxymoron in this otherwise democratic society. Rudin, the same one that was mentioned in Mobius 30 years later, of course decides to be an and asks if they have to bow to Lara Sue one day, which she responds by hitting him with the book. Literally. Honestly, I'm alright with this stuff. It shows us that Angel Island is different and introduces us to Lara Sue, and the inherited fiery temper from her father and mother, Knuckles and Julie Sue. Seriously, what did you think was going to happen if those two had a kid? We then cut to a shuttle arriving from Mobotropolis, carrying a future version of Rotor that I swear looks like a Sith Lord. He's on an important mission on behalf of the King and Queen, who meets with Espio with this weird-looking beard thing. Seriously, what is that? It's distracting me. Regardless, the King and Queen want to do a family meetup, and Espio relays this riveting information to Knuckles. Knuckles in Mobius 25 years later is rocking an outfit that I honestly adore, with a hat similar to the one in the Sonic OVA and the upcoming Knuckles TV series, along with a general cowboy-esque outfit. The two converse about important matters to the reader, such as romance. Because when I think of Mobius 25 years later, I think of discussing personal matters between these characters. Before the much more interesting topic of Rotor comes up, who Espio is thinking is here to see another scientist named Kobar. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Who is Kobar and what is their history with Rotor? Well, we're not going to get into those actually interesting questions as Knuckles ends the conversation, as he needs to attend Lara Sue's unveiling ceremony that evening. Also, did he inherit the Batcave or something? Because that looks a lot like the Batcave. Not that I'm complaining. We then move on to Rutan returning home from school. I seriously don't know how to pronounce his name, I am so sorry. Where Linda and Dimitri await them. You know how I said in Mobius 30 years later that I had a childhood crush on Linda? Yeah, these drawings are why. On a more serious note though, Linda and Dimitri are here for some reason. I don't mind different roles for these characters in this timeline, but they've been shown as nothing but villainous entities before Mobius 25 years later. I would have appreciated a little comment like, oh, how times have changed, or something like that as to why these characters have a more friendly relationship with the main cast. We don't even have much time to dwell on it, as it moves on to Knuckles trying to convince Lara Sue to attend their unveiling. It turns out Lara Sue really doesn't want to do it, as she wants to be a guardian like her father, and she's locked herself in her room. Knuckles isn't making much progress, being a temperamental hothead, Julie Sue being the sole voice of reason here. Knuckles states that she would be a fantastic guardian, but he doesn't believe that there is a need for one at this time, along with others. Then the conflict abruptly ends with Lara Sue coming out and agreeing to go as long as Knuckles is the one to have the first dance with her. The conflict really wasn't resolved and, ended out of nowhere. What the f? That is the first story of Mobius 25 years later.
That's it?
You can make fantastic short stories with a limited amount of time. Archie Sonic has many. Mobius 25 years later is not one of them, despite being awarded 12 pages for this story. It wastes time on unimportant minutia instead of hooking the reader on its interpretation of Mobius. Did we really need that info dump about the history of Angel Island? Did we really need to have a conversation between Rotor and Espio about inviting the royal family over for dinner? Did we really need to have Knuckles and Larasu have a conflict about a ceremony? As a writer, you have to know that your time is limited, especially in the case of short stories, and you need to use every signal, image, and word to the best of your ability. I know there will be more stories after this, and some of them very well could address some of the criticisms that I have here, but as an introduction, you have to make a good first impression. Mobius 25 years later does not. And if we are to cover more of this future, I see dark clouds up ahead. Anyway, that's all for this episode of Jordan's Soapbox. Join us next time as we return to the lawsuit that would change these comics forever.
Thank you for visiting the Jordania Volcano Hotel. We hope that you'll visit again soon. Before you leave, would you like something from our gift shop? Becca has the latest and totally not looted goods from all over the world. One item of note is the subscribe button, coming from the US state of California. It works best when you ring its bell and turn on notifications, so you don't miss an episode of Jordan's Soapbox. We also have a limited edition video that we also think you might like, and a collection of Jordan's Soapbox episodes in a playlist, all for the price of... wait a minute. Free? We're giving these out for free? Becca, we are bankrupt!